Cool. Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hi,
Good.
Jeff.
Doing great. How are you, Jeff?
Hello.
I'm good. Talon? It's like
Good.
roll call. Roll call. Talon.
Here.
Dan.
We need our walk-up music.
Yes.
Jeff's here. Hi, Phil. All right. Well, cool. Hey, yeah, this is how we get back together. So really exciting. Jan participated in WordCamp, which was last year. Wasn't last year your first year attending WordCamp? That was down in, is it Minneapolis?
Yeah, specifically, this is WordCamp Minneapolis.
Yeah.
There's WordCamps all over the place.
All over the country, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually attended it in person last year in 2019.
Yep,
And
that was my first year.
Right. Really quick, what is WordCamp?
WordCamp is essentially a get-together for people who are involved in WordCamp, in the WordCamp or WordPress community, I should say.
Right.
And it includes business owners, just users, developers, designers, the whole gamut, including companies that are also vendors. And it's basically a conference where we have a number of sessions and educational tracks and can just get together and learn more about WordPress and talk about why we like it.
Right. Which, you know, we've always at Creative Arcade, we've done a lot of different projects, not in WordPress, but it's definitely a go-to for many. And it makes the most sense for a lot of our clients. But go ahead, Phil.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. How big is the camp? Even last year versus this year, if you have any idea.
I'm not exactly sure what the number of attendees were, but there were a couple hundred people there, I believe. I can try to look up the exact statistics and see how many were there.
Just curious.
So obviously this year with COVID, they held a virtual conference, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which you basically quote unquote attended, but I also believe you helped out this year, didn't you?
Yeah, I volunteered this year. After attending last year, I really wanted to get involved in the community. And I've been developing in WordPress for a long time, and I figured it was good to give back. And that's really what's cool about the WordPress community is you have a lot of people that just want to share what they know, get other people involved, and give back. And so this year, yeah, I volunteered.
Yeah,
nice.
That's really cool. So it was like what? It was like 2 days worth of.
This year was 1 day because it was virtual. We did everything on 1 day. They had some preliminary WordPress 101 stuff on Thursday, and then Friday was the main track. And last year it was this similar setup. We had some basic sessions on Thursday, the full WordCamp on Friday, and then we actually had some closing stuff and then socialization on Saturday. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to do that this year.
Cool. So basically, did it work this year then? So you basically logged into certain sessions you wanted, or?
Yeah, all of the sessions this year were done. The conference itself was done with a combination of different things. It was YouTube, Zoom, Slack, Google Docs, all over the place. A lot of the work was done. The heavy lifting for this was all done by a company called Blaze Streaming Media, and they were awesome. They did all the technical stuff as far as coordinating everything and which signal goes where. But essentially what happened is all of those who were working, and this was the MCs, the moderators, the speakers, and then the basically the producer, Blaze Streaming Media, were all logged into Zoom so we could communicate internally. And then the tracks themselves were sent out to YouTube on 2 separate YouTube videos that just, once we started the video up in the morning, they went all day. So I believe you can go back and watch each of the tracks on WordCamp if you're curious about what happens. And then outside of the actual stream, everybody who was involved, whether it was the organizers, the speakers, the media producers, all of that were logged into a separate Slack channel as well. And so we communicated internally ahead of time. I believe I first started communicating with them about volunteering back in May, maybe April.
Wow.
Getting things coordinated, signing up for the schedules, figuring out who was going to do what, who was going to moderate, who was going to MC, getting the speakers all lined up. So it was a really interesting combination of technology that all worked really well. And the really cool part was we were logged into Zoom just like we're doing right now. and Blaze Streaming Media was able to take the slides and the speaker and the MC out of Zoom and send that off to YouTube. They took one particular presenter inside Zoom, and it was something I hadn't done before, but it was really interesting because I could see behind the scenes on one screen everything that was going on in Zoom, and then on YouTube as well. Since I was one of the moderators, I had to watch the sessions on YouTube as well to keep an eye on chat. And so then as a moderator, we would watch YouTube chat, get questions for the presenter, add them into a Google spreadsheet, and then the MC would read the Google spreadsheet and read them back to the presenter. It was interesting, but it worked really, really well.
Wow.
And yeah, there was a lot to it. And the coordinators, everybody who organizes WordCamp, they put in so much work. I can't even imagine.
Right.
And then outside of those two presentation tracks, because usually there are industry vendors and WordPress vendors there, they had a separate hallway track on YouTube that you could log into. Actually, that was not on YouTube. That was in Zoom. You could actually log into Zoom and talk to the different vendors. So if you had a question for WordFence or WP Engine, they had reps there, and you were essentially logging into their booth to talk to them and interact with them. Because normally those vendors are set up in whatever conference hall we're in. Last year it was at the University of Minnesota, their alumni center, and they had their booths set up that you could browse in between sessions. And so, but it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Wow. Did you spot anything like funny behind the scenes?
There were some interesting bloopers, and just to me, some of the chaos that was going on behind the scenes was it was controlled chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get things going last minute. As typical in any production, we ask for videos from vendors and presenters, and I think they were getting videos for WordCamp the day before.
Oh wow.
Try to get them into the reel, because they would run these video reels in between sessions. Just trying to keep everything moving. Was interesting.
So tell us more about the tracks that you saw. Like, what did you actually learn there?
I mostly, as probably is no big surprise to you, I tend to stick to the developer-centered side of WordCamp, so it tends to be pretty technical. But I attended a number of different sessions. The first one, I believe, if I'm going in order, was a session called UX Design and Strategic Chaos, or User Experience Design and Strategic Chaos, and that was an interesting session to get into, because whether you're a designer or a developer, you have to deal with a user experience design. And the presenter had some, I believe this was Tracy Apps, she's been doing UX design for 20 plus years. She had some really good insights into user experience. And then I went out of the developer box, I thought, and into the design side, and somebody was talking about color palette implementation in WordPress themes, which actually ended up being developer centered because there was a lot of code involved, which was awesome. To me, at least. And then I went to a presentation about auditing your website, and this was one of the ones where I was a moderator, I believe, as far as auditing your website for performance and accessibility and all of that stuff. And then in the afternoon, I was in one about hackers and the importance of keeping up to date with WordPress and plugins. Talked a lot about hacking there, and then started the last two sessions were both really closely related. One of them was talking about the future of WordPress as a headless CMS and where it's going and why. And then the last session was talking about the technical details about making WordPress better for the JAMStack. And if you're not familiar with that, JAMStack it's a stack of technology that's a combination of JavaScript, API, and markup language. And it's very closely related to WordPress as a headless CMS. So the last few sessions got pretty technical.
I figured out what jam means now.
Yeah. It's not just the sweet fruit product you put on your toast in the morning.
Right.
JAMStack sounds like a peanut butter and jelly.
Right.
As someone who's not very tech savvy in the code area, when you're talking about API and all that, what are those three things exactly?
In the JAMStack?
Yeah.
Okay. JavaScript is a language that's used a lot on websites, and it's a scripting language that you embed in your page, and it gives you access to the ability to get to data behind the scenes and to manipulate the content on the page with this programming language. It's a separate programming language. So JavaScript is what the technology is written. It's the language. Then you go into an API, and that's API stands for Application Programming Interface. And the API is something that you add on top of JavaScript. And so there are a lot of different frameworks out there in APIs, frameworks being React, jQuery, and some of these, they basically extend JavaScript to do different things. The API is what gives you commands to a different interface. And so from JavaScript, you can actually make a JavaScript call to WordPress, which is written in a different language, and pull data and content in using JavaScript from the WordPress database. And then the markup language is HTML's markup language that's used to tell you how the data that you just pulled using JavaScript is presented to the browser. And so that's all three of those combined together to create your content.
Wow.
I'm glad I know that guy.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining that.
Hopefully that
sure
was
I'll ask
clear
you
enough.
again next week.
So
Yeah, by all means, ask questions. It's
Yeah.
I get a kick out of the technical stuff. Not everyone does.
you had talked about a headless CMS, which sounds scary.
Yes.
I think it's, we're kind of getting into Halloween time, it's kind of fitting, but like what is that all about?
That headless CMS, basically, when people think of a content management system, usually they're referring to a content management system like WordPress, where you go into a backend and you can manipulate all the data, all the content on the site. And then there is code built into that application that takes your data and presents it to the user. When both the backend side and the front end are driven on the same platform, it's generally referred to as a monolithic content management system. So it's one system. What Headless does is it takes the back end and decouples it from the front end. And so you can manage all of your data using the WordPress back end, but you're not using WordPress to present that to the browser. It could be on the front end that the user sees could be on a completely different server or written in a totally different technology. And so there's a lot of approaches to using Headless, using a headless CMS, and there's a lot of reasons why. And this is kind of the cutting edge of WordPress right now, is using WordPress as a headless CMS, because WordPress as itself is a really robust system for managing content. It's really useful for that, but there are some cases where you don't want to use WordPress to present that content on the front end.
Sure.
So that's where the headless comes in. You can still use the familiar WordPress backend, but use something completely different to present it, or you're not necessarily presenting dynamic files at all on the front end. One of the possible cases of using WordPress as a headless CMS is that you manage all of your content using the WordPress admin, and then use a plugin or other software to generate completely static files and just upload those static files to a CDN.
Sure.
And so it's completely separate, which means anytime you change content, you have to regenerate those files and upload them. But there are reasons and use cases for why you would want to do that.
Interesting. You also mentioned hacking.
Yeah. That turned into an interesting one. He was talking about why hackers break into WordPress sites and what they're trying to do with it, and why it's important for us to keep our sites updated. A lot of people, WordPress sometimes gets a bad rap because it gets hacked frequently, but one of the reasons it gets hacked frequently is because WordPress has roughly a third of the content management system market on the web right now. I think WordPress powers a third of the websites. And so if somebody is going to put their energy into hacking a content management system, WordPress is a pretty big target. Right. Why would you attack anything else? So there are frequent attacks. And what was really interesting, this is one of the ones I was moderating, and I got a lot of questions at the beginning. This was presented by Nick Wolf, and he introduced himself. He's an attorney, but he's also a certified ethical hacker. And of course, the questions kept flooding in. What's an ethical hacker, and how do you get certified as one? And then the next question was, and who does the certification? But really interesting hearing him talk about it. And he explained a number of the reasons why people would hack a WordPress website and what you can do to protect yourself. And it's actually surprising why people generally would hack a WordPress website. And I think one of the most important takeaways is I've had experience fixing hacked websites, and the first thing people do is get really upset is, why would someone do this to me? And one of the points he made is that when somebody hacks your website, it's not personal. They're just trying to use the resources of your website to do something else that they want, whatever their goal is. And most frequently, I think it's to either send spam email or generate search engine spam.
Right.
And I believe all the stuff, we're going to have some blog posts written up about this that go into a little bit more detailed. But the good news is that there's a lot you can do to protect your website.
And didn't you say that they had some kind of live hacking thing going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He sat there and had some test sites set up that he showed how someone would get into a site. And lest that make you nervous, everything he was exploiting is something that has already been fixed. He's not going to want to show an exploit that's still valid. But it was kind of scary how easy it was for him. He would simply log in and send a command to a WordPress page, and he had created himself an admin user on their site. And once you're an admin user, you can go in and do anything. And it was a single keystroke, and he was an admin on the site. Kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
If your site's not protected, but there's a lot you can do to protect your site. That was an interesting one, and you can tell I start to get excited about the geeky stuff.
No, that's great.
When you were talking about the different tracks you went to, I obviously latched on to the design one.
Mm-hmm.
And you presented back to us before about this a little bit, but I think part of the service we're doing here, it might be helpful to talk about again, but was the customizable color options.
Yeah.
For theme. I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny. I had to laugh when we were talking about it, because he did talk about some of the theory behind color design and branding and all of that important stuff. But then he dove into code, and it made me happy because I thought I was getting into a design session, but he presented a lot of code. But what came out of it is, when I was talking to all of you about it, I think one of your first reactions for the designers was, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you let a customer change colors on your design?
Yeah.
And because I was all excited that, hey, when we make a custom theme for a client, I can do this. I can give them options to change colors on the website, and then, look, this is what happens. And I think you both shuddered internally. But there are some really good use cases for it, and he went beyond just implementing it for a theme. But it's essentially what his code did is allowed you to go into the theme customizer and pick a set of predefined colors. And he had brand colors and text colors and rollover effects all defined inside the theme options. But where that would be really useful, I think, is to limit access to that. And so you're defining these colors and theme options. And then what it does is, there was also code involved. I believe he was just using the Gutenberg editor, the block editor for WordPress. But what you can do then is, when you're using a block level editor or visual page layout tool like Gutenberg, or we've used Page Builder and Elementor, when you're going in and using these page builder tools and you open up a palette of color swatches, you can pick from those predefined colors. And that's where it gets really useful. So when a client is going in and editing content, they don't necessarily have to remember the hex values of the correct colors to use on their page. They can just pick from a set of predefined brand colors. And so it allows them some flexibility to create content and take some of the work out of it. That you don't have to send them a list of hex values of what they have to type in and worry about them breaking that. They can just pick a color swatch.
That's actually a really good use, because I know from experience, as going through and adding content and, changing colors and whatever, and, and other things too. Yeah, sometimes that's the most time consuming thing, is like, oh shoot, what was that hex value again?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it'll be stored in memory, and it'll start to autofill that if you use it a lot. But until then, it's always like, oh shoot, what is that hex in? Go back, find it. Okay, there it is. So I could. And
the cool part is, he gave it really meaningful names. When he was using Gutenberg, he could hover his mouse over the color, and it would say brand color 1, brand color 2, dark text, light text. etc. And you could just
You know what else that happens too by manually inputting it? This happened to me 1,000 times. Is sometimes, you know, with a hex value, if it's like 00336A and you happen to, you know, fat finger it to B, you're going to get a totally different shade of blue or whatever than what that might be bringing up.
Yeah.
You might not
or
know
transpose
until you look later and you go, it doesn't look right.
Something's off here.
Yeah.
Or of course, the client will say that doesn't look right.
Why does that blue look different? That's not our blue. You're like, yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
No,
So that would be one of the use cases where I can see why you would want to put that in theme options.
Right.
You put it right in their color picker.
I like that.
Now, there are some page builders that don't allow you to do that. Gutenberg makes it pretty easy. Page Builder does not.
Oh, wow.
WP Bakery's Page Builder. So that's one of the drawbacks there is it's not readily available to do in that one.
Huh. That's really cool.
You also, Jan, you mentioned accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, this was Amy June Heinlein, I believe is her name. She's an open source community ambassador at Canopy Studios. And she was talking about why you'd want to audit your website. And the bulk of it went towards accessibility. And she talked about why it's really important. And she went through a number of tools you can use to audit your website. And there were a few pointers about why you should care about accessibility. Because that's always, in my experience as a web developer, that tends to be accessibility kind of goes on the back seat for a lot of clients, for a lot of companies. They don't think about accessibility and the importance for it. But most importantly, your accessibility rules, they're required by law.
Yeah.
You have to make your website accessible. And so that's rule number one.
Especially in certain industries like government and or like healthcare. You know, we do those a lot. So you know, a lot of times and then there's even different rules even for government based on, you know, different aspects of that they want to cover or should cover.
Yep.
So,
and if that's not a good enough reason, following the rules for accessibility is going to include a wider consumer base for your content. That should be reason in and of itself to audit your website for accessibility. Why would you exclude anyone from your products or services? Right. So accessibility is extra work and it does take some effort, but it makes your website more inclusive. One of the statistics she had, and I can't remember where the statistic came from, was that 26% of the people living in the US have some form of disability. That's a huge chunk of your potential consumers. And so, and then the last really important part is even if you don't need accessibility on your site right now, you may someday. And it's a lot easier to build accessibility in while you're creating your website than to go back and add it back in later. As an
well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but you know, a lot of the base things that accessibility, you know, make sure you're doing are things that you should be doing anyways from like an SEO perspective, and you know, for you know, alt tags, and that's obviously so that, you know, readers can say, oh, this graphic, you know, is, you know, here's the name of it, and you know, for people that might not have great sight, you know, their eyesight is compromised, so they, you know, reads that stuff out loud, and those are things that are baseline things you should do for search engine optimization anyway. So
absolutely.
So there's even that part of it. So
one of the tools she talked about that she uses for auditing websites actually was kind of funny. She uses Grammarly.
Oh, yeah.
To help with auditing. Because I think the general rule of thumb on a website is you want to write your copy for a 9th grade reading level, and Grammarly will actually tell you what reading level is required for your content. So it's a good tool.
That's really interesting.
Not
Jeff,
to mention correcting grammar.
I think this is some of the stuff you had kind of just mentioned, Jeff. But Jan, when you look at accessibility to the search engines, other than like the alt tags and things like that, is there any kind of reward or punishment through any of the search engines? Do you know?
I don't believe they look at accessibility rules specifically. It's mainly just a matter of providing an alternative to your content is gonna make it more indexable by a search engine.
Right.
So it's gonna help you.
Okay.
Whereas not following those guidelines could potentially hurt you.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean that search engines aren't going to start rewarding that
Yeah.
someday, but it's not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So the last thing it sounds like you got to sit in on was something about user experience. What was that all about?
Something probably familiar to all of you is the chaos that comes in when you put the user in the user experience. And for
Oh,
anybody who's not aware, user experience is essentially just designing around the way you want users to interact with your website and the experience that they have using your software, your app, your website, whatever, or your physical design. That all goes into user experience. And the presenter talked about what happens when you take your really nice user experience and throw users into the mix. Shockingly enough, users are going to use your app,
mhm.
and it's messy because users don't use your website or your app the way you expect them to use it. She started off this presentation by saying user experience design in the wild is messy.
Yeah.
That was her intro. Really important, the point she made is that we don't design in a bubble. You could be the best user experience designer in the world, and the user is going to break your website because it's messy. We
Right.
don't design in a bubble. We design for people. And she talked about the term I liked was strategic chaos. It was a kind of a fun term, and some of the strategies you can use to work with and in that chaos. It was a fun presentation. I had in my notes after the session that it seems counterintuitive to use the phrase chaos strategy, but it made sense. But her ultimate point was that you have to have a plan in place. Important to remember that these tips that she gave us aren't a set strategy, but they are a strategy, and that it lets us adapt to the unexpected. And it seemed really timely considering that everything we're doing this year is unexpected. So it was a good presentation.
That's awesome.
And again, you'll get to those tips and a little more details in our blog posts that are going to be coming up in the near future.
How was the food at the virtual conference, Jan?
It was great. Walked downstairs. That was actually something that happened that was really funny. Is I started talking to one of the presenters, the one that put on the session about the color palettes, and we had both gone to the hallway track during lunch. We ran and grabbed food and came right back to our computers, and I saw something posted in Slack that he had started up a Google meeting for anybody that wanted to just hang out and eat lunch. And so I visited some of the vendor tracks, and then I hopped in the chat session with him, and we just sat in an impromptu chat session over lunch.
Weird.
Fun. And because so it still duplicated some of that experience last year, because I think the most fun I had, I believe I texted one of you when I got there last year and said, I'm among my people.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was a whole building full of WordPress people and developers and computer nerds, and it was great. And that this kind of duplicated that experience, because I had a lot of fun meeting other people from the industry.
Right.
Comparing notes. A lot of us were reminiscing about the old days of web development. And Taylor's going to roll her eyes because we're telling our old guy stories now. But
right. Tell me more,
reminiscing
Grandpa.
about the stuff we did in the early days.
I've got like the old statues in the background. I'm a grandma myself. Don't worry about it.
So tell me, what is in a virtual swag bag?
Virtual swag bag. We actually got real swag.
You did?
The volunteers, at least. I got a package in the mail the day before, I believe.
Lucky.
And I got this box, and I was thinking, what in the world is in this random box? And it was the stuff that I got for volunteering. So
Nice.
that was fun.
So do you think next year, if they provided like a hybrid option, you would go virtual or would you go in person?
I'd want to go in person.
Yeah.
Because you get more time to sit down with people and talk to them.
Sure.
It's a lot more natural.
Right.
Asking questions flows a little bit better instead of having a moderator like me filtering out questions for you.
Yeah. How did you like being a moderator?
That was fun. I like being involved. I've wanted to get involved since the first time I went. And like I said, give back a little bit. I'm contemplating the idea of presenting at some point. And the presenter that I was talking to over lunch encouraged it. He was trying to convince me to present at some point. So
nice.
Might do that.
You've been doing great on this, I think. So go for it.
It would be fun. It's a good WordPress has an amazing community. That's something a lot of people may not know.
Right.
Is the community support for it is great. And that's one of the reasons I like it as a CMS. Some people are really leery about open source, but you have to think about the fact that being an open source CMS means it has thousands of developers looking at the code
Right.
and working on it and fixing it if there's a problem, and a huge community supporting them, writing the plugins and all of that. So it's a really mature, it has already matured really well, but it's continuing to change and grow. We've seen Gutenberg come out in the last year or two, the progress towards a headless CMS, and so many other features that WordPress is continually changing. It's fun.
Wow.
So what would you say is the number one thing you took away from this year?
Probably the fact that the sky is the limit with WordPress.
Yeah.
We've got to think outside the box. I know we talk about that at Creative Arcade a lot. But there are people doing things with WordPress that the original creators of WordPress probably never imagined would be done. But they're continually adapting and adding those features in. Like for going to a headless CMS, there are tools built into WordPress right now that let you access data from the WordPress engine from a completely separate front end. And they're building that in to support headless CMS. It also makes it easier for developers doing custom apps in WordPress to use that same data. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, don't box yourself in. It's the stuff you can do with WordPress is limitless.
Right.
Wow.
Sweet.
That's
Well, it
awesome.
sounds like it was fun and it was good, and learn stuff even if it was virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say the one thing nice about virtual is that it eliminates the travel time.
Yeah.
Would you ever?
There.
Oh, sorry.
No, so you log in and you're there.
Yep.
Yeah. Are you going to be a certified hacker by next year?
Depends on if I can find the free time. It looks like fun. Some of the stuff he was doing was got the gears turning, thinking, oh, that looks really cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Wow.
Ethical hacker though.
Yes. Sorry. Ethical. I forgot.
Yeah.
Certified ethical. Oh.
Yes. In other terms, it's a white hat hacker versus a black hat. That's a term you'll hear a lot.
Okay. That's interesting.
Years ago, I dabbled in it. I found a server where they actually maintained a server online where they deliberately left it out there for you to try to break into.
Oh, cool.
It's changed a lot over the years.
I have this vision of like trying to crack the safe kind
Safe, yeah.
Got the ear thing up there.
See, I'm seeing someone like call and kind of distract someone. Is like,
oh,
that's what's crazy about hacking a system like WordPress, though, is it's usually not a person sitting there trying to break into your site. It's a script running on a server somewhere.
sure.
wow.
And they're running a script that's hitting hundreds and hundreds of websites to see if they can get into one.
I like our ideas better.
Yeah. I like the idea of Tom Cruise like coming through a ceiling.
You're thinking of movie hackers.
Music.
Right. Which is a great movie, by the way, Hackers.
Hackers, yeah, that's a good one.
Dun, 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 dun.
I hate almost any movie that has a computer system in it, though, because it's so ridiculous. But whatever, they have to make a good movie.
Yeah, I have heard from like developers who are like, yeah, it's not that easy, when they're like, let me just do 5 keystrokes and we're in the system.
Although if someone is really careless with their website, it can be that easy if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Every week I watch a webinar put on by WordFence. I was actually at one this morning, and they talk about some of the vulnerabilities that they found and have fixed, or that have been fixed. And it's kind of scary. If you don't maintain your website properly, you can really put yourself at risk, you and your data.
Is that just like maintaining just like those monthly updates you kind of do?
Yeah, the WordPress core plugins, themes can even have security flaws in them.
Okay.
As well as server-side technology. Always got to be updating.
Yeah.
No.
Cool.
That's
well, you blink and 45 minutes goes by, so.
Wow. or you let me start talking about technical stuff.
It's all good information that's why we're doing it. So.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all that and with our listeners. But no, it's good, and I think it's just you had a lot of good points of why WordPress is still continually being the one that, you know, I think you can always go to when you're thinking about a website, not just whatever, but the application side and what you can do with it. It's pretty amazing, you know. So it'll just keep getting better and better. So it's good.
And we just scratched the surface. So
Yeah.
I think there will be more details in our blog coming up.
Well, cool. Anything else, the rest of you?
Not really. I guess if people are listening, the people who are listening,
Not if.
not if, the people are listening should send us any questions they have.
Yeah.
Because even beyond answering them, you know, we can dive deeper and provide content about them.
Yeah, it makes sense. That totally makes
Definitely.
sense. Okay. Well, if that's it, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk more some other day about some other cool thing like WordCamp. Yeah. Right.